Welcome to the Homeschool High School podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and I am so excited to be here with my new friend, Whitney Whitten. And we were at a workshop together with our friend, Teresa Weidrich, and the Homeschool Mama Self-Care group. And I said, this is a woman who lives real life. So I wanted to talk to Whitney on the podcast. So Whitney, tell us. So Whitney has a very unique group of people that she works with, homeschool moms. Yeah. So we're tell us a little bit about your homeschool story. How did you get started homeschooling? What makes your family you?
So I started homeschooling. I was one of those, I would say, accidental homeschoolers in a way. I did not know that I valued homeschooling until I had four kids that were 5 and under. And I just
Oh,
looked at what the reality of our schedule would be if we went to school. So
mm,
I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and I worked with kids and knew just the value of having time to play and learn through life. And I
yeah.
thought, well, how are we going to be able to do that if we are in two different carpool lines and,
Mm,
juggling all of the things? So I started off homeschooling, oh, it's just kindergarten. We can do that. And, here we are 6 years later, and clearly our reasons have changed, but still
mm,
those core values of wanting to have the time together as a family and be able to explore, now that they're older, some of their individual interests and develop those real life skills together. So that's how we got
mm.
here.
So you have a unique story about the people that you work with. So your niche, the folks that you work with, is not like, oh, how do we choose curriculum, but more on real life things like overwhelmed, overstimulated, too much stuff.
Yes.
Um, so I would love for you to share your refrigerator story because
Oh,
it,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah. So we just got back from a trip. We went to a couple of states, stayed in three different hotels over the course of 6 days, which, with a family of six can be a lot in itself. A good thing, but a lot. So we were
Yeah.
glad to get home, open the door to the refrigerator. Something smelled funny, but maybe just leftovers. So, well, it wasn't leftovers. Our whole refrigerator had spoiled.
Oh,
Um, it is just an off week anyway, right, Vicky? When you get back from a trip, it takes a little
yes.
while, not just for you to recover, but for the kids. And
Mhm.
so we got a new refrigerator, and then the new refrigerator needed to be repaired, so they replaced it. And here we are after 5 days of being back, trying to get into a routine of homeschooling, and it's just been
Mhm.
one constant interruption after another between dentist appointments and refrigerator repairs, and then replacing the refrigerator. It's just, we could all homeschool fairly easily if we had, this nice little tidy window of time that would never be interrupted or bombarded, but that's just not how it is. We spend so much of our time like a ping pong ball as moms, and it can be a lot. It can be overwhelming. And
Mhm.
depending on just the way that your particular nervous system is set up, we can hit overstimulated really easily, if not from the world around us, just from all of the things we're having to hold in our minds. So,
Mhm.
hold how do we hold things together when honestly most of our weeks aren't going to be uninterrupted weeks? Most of
Mhm.
our weeks are going to be like this. And so I really came to a point about 4 years ago where I realized, okay, well, if I can't figure out how to get through weeks like this and make homeschooling work for me as a mom, then this is not going to be sustainable.
Mhm.
So that's how Sensational Moms, really happened. We had a very difficult season as a family with relocation and during COVID, and
Mhm.
dealing with children who are neurodivergent in their own ways, and
Mhm.
figuring out how to make this work for me, not just my children, uh, was what started things.
Yeah, and I love that you are very real. I remember the old days where we had the Teaching Home magazine that all us homeschoolers got. You tell my age. And the picture was a Norman Rockwell-ish, like the perfect homeschool family, which didn't exist. It was only a fictional magazine cover that we'd all have a family full of real human beings and refrigerators and everything else going on in life. And so
Yes, yes.
not perfect.
10
Yeah.
minutes
And so,
ago, I was comforting my crying child. It's just, and then here I am talking to you.
yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Well, and I like the way you use the word ping ponging back and forth, and that's the way us moms do. Is we're doing this and then we're doing that, and if we're not doing it externally, it's happening in our head, like trying to keep track of everything. So it's
Yes.
a very, very excellent illustration of. So in your family, you've got different kinds of kids because we all have different kinds of kids. And so you have learned feet on the ground, plus your training as an occupational therapist on a lot of ways to handle the ping ponging. So how do you handle, and what would you suggest to moms when they have a moment where there's just too much going on and they are overstimulated and overwhelmed? Like, what are some tips?
Yeah, so I think that really where we need to start is listening to what's going on in our bodies and our minds before we get to that boiling point.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a soft simmer at first, right? And then the little bubbles before the rolling boil and then the lid blows.
That is a good way to
So
explain that. Yeah.
so we are so quick to ignore our own body signals as moms, and we kind of should ourselves so much that we don't realize we're kind of controlling our own behavior so much that we don't realize what's bubbling under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So having time to really learn your body's cues and what that looks like and feels like is essential. So
Yeah.
I was thinking, what words would I describe that, to my children? Because I had a moment earlier with the kids where I needed to have a meeting with them to let them know, where I was. Because, now that we've had these conversations more often, they don't kind of come out of left field, and I can have it earlier before I really, really have that lid blowing moment. But said,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like electricity kind of going through your body. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll just tell my kids, like, I just feel like this right now. Sometimes I can't find the words. Um, but being able to feel that before you
Mm-hmm.
respond in a way that is going to require time to come back from. So, yes, starting there. And then once you realize that, if you can just remember the word deep, that will get you far. So I know we hear a lot about deep breathing, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll come back to that. But deep pressure and muscle engagement are two places that are really helpful to start, because we get stuck in that stress moment
Mm-hmm.
and we need
Mm-hmm.
to move through it. And if we actually physically move through it, it's easier mentally and emotionally to move through it. So,
That's I want to just jump in there. Like, we as Americans, and especially as moms, are so busy going all the time. And what you're talking about is stopping, and as a mom, looking at our own bodies, how our bodies are feeling, what is the message that the body is giving us, and then helping to take care of that so that we can do our job well. And
right.
that's like, so to stop, and I'm just jumping in there to point out that the
Yeah,
word
yeah.
deep that you said, so deep breathing. Now tell us about the deep other things.
Yeah. So, there are certainly things you can do. I think when I say, muscle engagement and moving, I think we kind of jump to like, oh, well, I just need to exercise or I need to have this
Mhm,
routine. Okay,
mhm,
let's not go there. In that moment, there are things that you can do anywhere with anything. Like
mhm,
I've done
mhm.
wall push-ups, I've done car push-ups,
Ah,
I've done high knees, I've walked up and down steps.
mhm,
I've pushed my hands together and pulled my hands together, pull them apart.
mhm,
There's so many things that we can just use our body for. You can do squats in the moment if your
mhm.
knees are letting you do that. You know,
Yeah.
there are so many options that just use your body weight to be able to do that. So
And
muscle
and
engagement
so
for
it
sure.
like, yeah, if us moms are having a moment, and
Mhm.
we push our hands together and pull our hands apart or do a wall push up. What will that do for our bodies?
So it taps into a sense that we don't really talk too much about, which is called proprioception. And that's a sense that is lets you know how much what's going on in your muscles and joints in your body, and your fascia, which is, like a
Mhm,
thin connective tissue that is covers your whole body. It's your body's largest sensory organ there. So it uses that sense to bring you back into the moment.
mhm,
And it's really as close as you can get to a magic pill as far as sensory input goes. If you're feeling if you're not feeling, that elevated sort of phase,
okay,
if you're feeling like you're having a hard time getting going, if you're feeling
mhm,
sluggish, it
mhm,
works either way. So it's
mhm.
really kind of a magic pill.
Yeah, and that's I love the kind of explanations behind things because it makes gives me permission to do that more. But yeah, I have found that like if I'm in a stressful moment, I'll rub my hands together, and I think that's
Hmm.
what you're talking about is
Yes,
just something deep with the
yes,
muscles.
exactly. And I think
You
words like push, pull, squeeze, those
know?
sorts of things will get you back into your body and build what you would call your sense of felt safety, to be in
Mm,
that moment.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and when we feel safe with ourselves, it's easier to do all the mom overstimulation things. Yeah,
Absolutely, it
yeah.
really is. So that's one of my favorite things to do. I
Mhm,
usually recommend that and do that before I go to deep breathing, because until you really start to learn your body's cues and what's going on, all too
mhm.
often we get to that elevated state before we realize what's going on. And honestly, by the time you get there, taking a few deep breaths may
That's not a magic pill. Yeah, it helps,
right.
but it's not a magic pill. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. All right, so you had the deep with the hands pushing or pulling or wall push-ups or car push-ups.
Mhm.
What else would you suggest?
So once you've done that, I think I think it's helpful sometimes to remove ourselves from the situation physically if we can.
Mm,
Depending on the age and needs of our child, sometimes we think that that might not be possible, but it really bears thinking about, is it really not possible?
mhm,
Sometimes it isn't, but most of the time it it is. And there have been times where I do have a kid who is very anxious. There's been times where I couldn't be out of her sight, but I could be on
mm,
the other side of that glass door. And
uh-huh. Mm,
literally just having that physical space between us for a minute has been really helpful. And
mhm,
being outdoors, I think that we can
mm,
forget, having, especially if we tend to be visually overstimulated easily, just
mm,
physically removing yourself from that messy kitchen or that crowded homeschool table where everything's out and it's
mhm.
just too much. And having that reset button can be really powerful, that you come back in and you realize, oh, well, actually, I don't feel like I need to rage clean anymore. I feel better.
I love that. And that's yeah, that physical separation. I know one of the things that when I had 5 very young kids, um, I would spend a fair amount of time in a bad moment in the bathroom, and I
Yes,
would just sit in there with nobody talking to me, or I'd splash cold water on my face, or just
yes.
be and, because nobody could complain about me being in the bathroom, although they would all be standing outside the bathroom door
Or you
waiting.
might see fingers underneath. I
Oh
know.
my gosh, yes.
And it is interesting because, each season of life presents its own challenges. And, I was kind of under the misunderstanding that the overstimulation and overwhelm as my kids got older would get easier. And it didn't. It's just different.
It's just
And
different.
yeah, yeah. So no fingers under the doors anymore, but there's sometimes you, as a mom, you just kind of have a spider sense. You just know there's someone out there waiting for you.
Yes, yes, exactly.
So
So, yeah, everybody has kind of a taste of who you are is with your training and your just life experience as a mom, you've learned a lot about how to live in the moment with your family and to make those moments better moments. So, because we have real humans as family members, so we need support. Tell about the work that you do in your coaching.
So I coach moms one-on-one and walk through, each situation, of course, is unique, but I feel strongly that there's just so much information out there on the internet that it can be overwhelming, especially if we're already feeling overwhelmed on a
Mhm,
day-to-day basis. That
mhm,
really making it personal and walking through the process that I call a CPR method for developing compassion for yourself, not
mhm,
just in those moments, but outside of those moments. What language are we using to describe what's going on so we can actually meet our needs? And then we also work on spend the bulk of our time with the P, which is considering practicing your plan. So we practice
mhm,
it because it's always a work in progress. Seasons
mhm,
change, needs
mhm,
change, but to actually know that those moments of overwhelm and frustration are going to come. It's really not a matter of if. So, since
mhm,
we know they are, what can we do in those moments? What actually helps us? So, let's try it outside of those stressful times so that we can have sometimes even a visual reminder. If it happens to be in the bathroom, stick it on the back of the bathroom door so that when
mhm,
your prefrontal cortex goes offline because you're frustrated, you've actually got it there so that you can know what to do.
mhm.
And we practice then returning back to the situation with our child because where we do life, that's the thing about homeschooling is, we have so many opportunities with our kids to model self-regulation so that
Mhm,
they can develop it themselves. So let's go back to the child if we've had to leave and explain, in an understandable way what has happened. If there's anything that needs to be repaired, that's the R. So we're going to work on repairing their relationship, which sometimes, depending on what's happened, may not be immediate, it might be later, but circling
mhm,
back to that relationship and explaining what's going on, taking responsibility for our words or our actions if
mhm.
we need to, and really modeling in real life for our kids
Yeah.
what's happened and just boots on the ground, showing them what to do when they are also overwhelmed and
Yeah.
overstimulated.
Yeah. And I could see the moms who work with you just having that extra person speaking into their lives is very supportive and helpful.
It
Yeah.
is. I think that I'm so happy to be here talking with you, Vicky, because I feel like this is certainly something that needs to be talked about more. We have our own Norman Rockwell moments with social
Mm,
media, where it's like we just scroll through and we see this curated vision of what homeschooling and motherhood should be like. And then when it's not that way, we can feel
yeah.
really discouraged and isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is real and it's comfort. And that is what we moms need a lot of times. So there's two ways that you are reaching out, and one is the one-on-one coaching, but you also have your podcast. So talk
Oh,
about the
yes,
podcast
I
a
do.
little bit.
So
Yeah.
there are so many ways that we can look at our life as a whole and think, how can we
Mhm,
support ourselves to be resilient through the
mhm,
stress that's going to be coming our way? So
mhm,
I enjoy having guests in to speak about their areas of expertise, such as movement or nutrition,
mhm,
sleep, and
mm,
how can we be mindful of the ways that we can increase our resilience to be able to
yeah,
handle the things that are coming at us? I love having other moms who are homeschooling and work with those areas like
yeah,
movement because it's so hard sometimes to juggle all of these responsibilities and to have someone else who has seen all of these difficulties and make it work still with our lives is really encouraging.
mm, mm. Yeah, and what a blessing. So what's the name of your podcast?
It's called Sensational Moms. Just like
Good.
on Instagram and Facebook, you can find me there, and the website is all Sensational Moms. And
Yeah,
I'm actually doing a live later with someone about movement. You can find that there as well. So just continuing the conversation about these things that can help us be able to show up as our best versions of ourselves that day.
awesome. That's beautiful. And so we'll put links in the show notes to Sensational Moms for the podcast and the website, and they can talk to you about coaching, which
That'd be
is a
great.
blessing and a support. So Any other things you'd like for folks to know?
I will be speaking at a conference this summer. I'll be giving 3 different presentations and be able to share resources there as well in North Carolina, the Special
Oh,
Needs Expo. So I'll give you some information about that to share as well. I have
wonderful.
found that while not all of the moms I've worked with have been neurodivergent, a lot of us do identify as in some ways as different, and or have children who can really push us to the max because their needs are just
Yeah,
placing more demands on us. So
yeah.
I'm happy to be able to be there and share resources with those families.
That'll be nice meeting everybody one-on-one. So we'll put links in the show
Yeah.
notes to that too. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Whitney, for being here and for sharing about like survival tips for us moms and your resources at Sensational Mom.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Vicki.
So this has been the Homeschool High School podcast brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. Thank you to Seth Tillman for editing, and we will see everybody next week.